Betrayal used to seem like the biggest pain in the world, but I was mistaken. While your younger sister is treasured like a priceless diamond, your own parents view you as a living disappointment, which is the true source of your pain. I will always remember my mother telling the neighbor that Ruby was a little unusual. However, our family's true pride is little Lucy. Distinct? Are they even aware of the harshness of being viewed as a blemish on their flawless painting? No, they don't. Or worst, they simply don't give a damn. Let me tell you everything right from the start if you believe I'm exaggerating. I'm a 33-year-old American lady named Ruby, and I live in Providence, Rhode Island. I work as the manager of a tiny, independent bookstore in the historic district that is replete with vintage books and the cozy scent of wood. I am currently working on the manuscript for my first novel and hold a master's degree in English literature. It sounds good, doesn't it? To my parents, however, it's just a life of waiting for something tangible, a short-term diversion, or a strange pastime I'm engaging in before returning to the real world. In the meantime, the brightest member of the Hadley family is my sister Lucy, who is 4 years younger. She is the focal point of every picture in the house, grinning while sporting scores of awards, elegant degrees, and gorgeous gowns. They provided Lucy with a private apartment, a brand new car for convenience, full tuition reimbursement, and admission to a prestigious university in California. I vividly recall my father icily stating, "If you're choosing to study literature, then you better at least learn to support yourself." I also had to take out student loans and work shifts at the school cafe. Perhaps they were simply being pragmatic, I used to believe. However, as I grew older, I came to understand that preference isn't a coincidence. It's deliberate. Lucy was at the center of every choice made in the house. My mother was really critical when I mentioned that I wanted to pursue writing in Vermont. "How are you going to support yourself? Will you continue to dream indefinitely?" Like Lucy, take a pragmatic approach. I knew that debating with someone who has decided not to see you simply makes it easier for them to turn away, so I didn't say anything at that moment, not because I agreed. When Lucy hosted an engagement party at a Connecticut lakefront estate when I was 25, that was the tipping point. To make the event look like it was featured in a high-end wedding magazine, my parents spent more than $180,000. Despite the fact that I was drowning in college loan debt, I was invited as the sister without receiving any financial assistance. I brought nothing but a fake grin and a borrowed clothing. Lucy merely laughed dryly when I gave her a leather-bound journal as a personalized gift to write in about her new life. Classic Ruby, eh? Okay. Artistic. I always felt like a piece of art that no one wanted to show off when I arrived at the house. When I mentioned the book I was writing, my mother would sigh, as though I were squandering valuable time on a useless pastime. My father would simply inquire, "Have you considered becoming a teacher? At least you get paid." Really, I'm not envious of Lucy. She is charming, gorgeous, and always manages to make a space feel brighter. The way the entire family acts as though I'm not someone to be proud of breaks my heart. I always play the silent or supporting role during family dinners, which are like plays. My mother would gleefully say, "Lucy just got promoted, Ruby. How about you? Is there anything new at the bookshop?" That tone pricked me like thorns. It was lovely yet condescending. My parents gave Lucy a mansion in Boston that was over $2 million when she got married. It had marble fireplaces, English-style rose gardens, and imported furnishings. On moving day, I was soaking from standing in the rain with a card that I had worked all week to save up. "Lucy finally has a place to start a family and space for the children," my mom said with a smile. To them, I've always been the one on the sidelines, and they never once asked if I wanted a family. The sensation of being the extra in my own life tale is something I've been accustomed to. However, they are unaware of it. I continue to write. In my tiny apartment above the bookshop, I type phrases that no one in my family has ever inquired about every night under a faint yellow lamp. For them, I don't write. I write to preserve my identity. While the world is turned away. You're mistaken if you believe that here is where the story stops. A crumpled lottery ticket and a rainy walk to a corner store changed my life in ways I never would have imagined. I entered the store of Mr. Harris, the silver-haired man who has been the counter for more than 30 years, on a gloomy Thursday morning, only to purchase a small muffin and a cheap cup of coffee. The remaining amount in my wallet was precisely $5. I noticed the blinking sign for the $94 million power win jackpot. I mumbled, "All I'm missing is a miracle," and laughed aloud before spending the remainder of my money on a ticket. Mr. Harris smirked and said in his raspy voice, "Ruby, if you win, buy this old store back." Not believing a word I said, I remarked dryly, "I'll buy the whole block." Before Mr. Harris yelled at me as I was leaving the store 3 days later, I had all but forgotten about it. "Hold on, Ruby. Have you looked at your ticket?" I went cold. "No. I cannot even recall where I placed it. I watched the live draw last night, and your ticket is the winning one." I almost toppled over in my chair. I tensed up. All of a sudden, my canvas bag seemed quite heavy. With my heart racing, I looked around frantically before taking out the rumpled ticket that still had a coffee stain on the edge. I proceeded to the official website after opening my phone. 21, 30, 44, 45, 58, 7, 16, 21. I glanced at the ticket and then at the screen again. Once. Twice. I almost passed out as my hands trembled. Mr. Harris caught me like a child collapsing as he emerged from behind the counter. "Breathe, Ruby, and sit down. You have won $94 million. With power play. It is more than 97 million. There was nothing I could say. I simply gazed at him, feeling as though I had been struck over the head. After silently pouring me a drink of water, Mr. Harris put his hand on my shoulder. "Now pay attention to me. Don't make any calls. Keep your mouth shut. No internet. No Mom, no Lucy, no Facebook. Nobody. Now you have to sign the back of that ticket." I took a pen out of my backpack and scrawled my name with shaking hands. Hadley, Ruby. Shakily. I had to write it 3 times on the back of the ticket since my hand was shaking so much. With more serious eyes than I had ever seen, Mr. Harris nodded. "Give me the ticket now, and I'll keep it safe at the store. I'll also call my daughter Sharon, a good and discreet financial attorney. A team is necessary. Right away." All I could do was nod. An hour later, I sat opposite from Sharon in a tiny office behind the supermarket. A woman in her 40s with her hair tied back, dressed in dark slacks and a white button-down shirt. It wasn't what I had in mind for a lawyer. Her eyes, however, were icy and piercing. "We must first establish a trust," Ruby stated honestly. 2 shell corporations followed. "From now on, all assets you purchase will be registered under legal companies rather than your name. Above all, you are not allowed to appear in public. Change your email address and phone number if you can. You believe that my family will find you, not simply your relatives, former classmates, co-workers, or the person who borrowed $3 from you in 2011. I took a deep breath. "I do not wish for anyone to be aware." Sharon nodded as she gave me a look. "Then, this is the first thing you should do to defend yourself." Everything changed rapidly during the course of the following 2 weeks. The proprietor of the bookstore had enough money to recruit 3 staff for the next 2 years after I quietly resigned. Leaving behind my beloved old armchair and bookcases, I moved out of my old apartment and used the trust to purchase a modest home in the Providence suburbs. The house featured a comfortable kitchen, a reading room with large windows overlooking a fiery red maple, and a backyard. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to seek for permission to live my life as I pleased, and no one knew where I lived or that I was wealthy. I was sitting in my new office, a bright space filled with floor-to-ceiling bookcases. I felt both light and heavy when I looked at the lottery ticket that was now securely sealed away. There was a change. Not simply my bank account numbers. No more guilt-tripping voicemails from Lucy, no more texts from my parents about obligatory family dinners, and no one referring to me as the writer who would never mature. The silence on my phone felt odd. A whole new future, just me, and blank pages. I'm waiting for my own hand to rewrite it. The phone suddenly rang. Not Sharon. No, Mr. Harris. Lucy was the one. I didn't answer. I once believed that writing novels was my dream. However, after holding a $97 million lottery ticket, I came to the realization that the true dream was not writing but empowering those who had never been heard to write. And I began with the years of silence I had to endure because of my family. 3 weeks after accepting the reward, I found myself standing inside an ancient structure tucked away in East Providence's deserted warehouse sector. 4 levels of broken glass windows, a leaking roof, and decaying red brick. This place should just be torn down, the broker replied, shaking his head. Through the corroded window frame, I could see the late afternoon sun striking the splintered wood floor and filtered through the dirty glass. I could only think of one thing. All of the stories that have been buried will begin with this. After 3 months, it was designated as Silver Incorporated's formal headquarters. I started Press, a publishing house, to help authors who had been passed over because they weren't popular or marketable. Silver Incorporated was created as a reminder to myself that, if we have the courage to rewrite our aspirations in silver ink, even those that have been worn down and scraped can still shine. I didn't employ people in the conventional manner. When the district cut budget, Jess, a single mother and former school librarian, was let go as my first editor. Caleb, a black man who had been turned down by every major advertising agency for having a style that wasn't marketable, designed my cover. Everybody brought their frustrations to me. And I gave them a chance, not because I was trying to be nice, but because I saw what the world was missing by ignoring them. Our first book launch was for a modest collection of poetry written by Linda, a 60-year-old retired nurse who wrote about healing and loss after her husband died of cancer. There was no market, and no one wanted to publish her poems. The conventional publishers stated. In the foyer of our recently renovated building, I hosted a comfortable signing ceremony and printed her book on the best paper with embossed ink. There were over 200 persons present. When Linda saw her name on the cover, she started crying. She murmured, "I thought my life was already over." "No," I said. "It's only the beginning." I continued after that. For children, the elderly, immigrants, and anybody else who has never had the opportunity to learn how to share their own experiences, I developed the Everyone's Writing Corner program, a free writing class effort. With circular tables, chalkboard walls, and a free library shelf, Silver Ink Press's 3rd floor was converted into a classroom. I dedicate 1 session per week to teaching middle school pupils from public schools with poor incomes the fundamentals of writing. A 13-year-old boy named Marcus once showed me a draft of a comic book that he had created himself. He was quiet and reserved. The main figure was a gray bear with sad eyes and the phrase, "I don't need to be understood, just heard," with rough pencil lines. We published a limited print copy of the program after I handed that draft to Caleb for redesign. When Marcus noticed his book was on the shelf next to Harry Potter and had a legitimate ISBN number, he froze during the signing ceremony. He muttered, "This was just a dream," I thought. "No," I gave his hand a light squeeze. "You wake up in a world that you created for yourself." I kept my family members in the dark. I kept the fact that I was managing a socially conscious publishing company with numerous literacy initiatives underway a secret from Lucy. I didn't notify my parents via email that I had contributed more than $2 million to regional cultural development initiatives. Since I was aware that they would simply inquire as to whether it is profitable. I don't require their comprehension. I'm not seeking retribution. However, I'm also not doing it to win back the approval of those who never thought I was valuable. Ruby is merely a dreamer, a label they put on me for life. Every book I print and every writer I assist is a silent slap against that label. I don't just dream, I transform them into foundations, tools, and weapons. Then, one Monday morning, as Jess and I were going through an immigrant author's work, my phone rang once more. Lucy. It was the third time that week. The message appeared. I noticed your business in the news. It seems good, but if you're still related, could you please lend me a hand? We're going to lose the house, and James lost his job. I put the phone down, locked the screen, and continued reading the manuscript. Composed in sincere yet broken English. A Mexican woman who had recently finished her ESL course. My mother is the subject of my writing. About how, at the end of the day, Mom showed me how to make soup out of whatever was left. I grinned. That line was more alive than any business report Lucy had boasted about, but it included nothing marketable. I glanced up at the quote by Toni Morrison that was hanging on the white wall behind my desk. What if you want to read a book but it hasn't been published yet? After that, you have to compose it. I'm working on that book, and I'm not going to quit. Though I didn't anticipate it so quickly, I knew the time would come. When the doorbell rang on Saturday morning, I had just finished making coffee and hadn't even settled in to read a manuscript. As if the house were on fire, quick and urgent. I glanced at the screen of the security camera. They were the ones. Lucy, wearing a cream-colored dress and nicely curled hair, looked like she had just stepped out of a magazine shoot as she stood at the door. While my father, wearing sunglasses, attempted in vain to conceal his discomfort, my mother fussed about his collar. There they stood. The three of them. After years of solely calling me the obstinate one, they came looking for me again, as if this were a friendly visit. I pulled the door open. My mother said, "Hello, Ruby," in a stern voice. "How are you?" I stepped aside and said, "Come in, I'm fine." No facial expression. No embrace. As though they had entered a weird new universe, they entered the living room. Lucy peered around the book-lined room, which was flooded with natural light from the wide glass windows, while my father gazed up at the high ceiling and crystal chandelier. "Oh," Lucy said. Do you want to decorate everything yourself?" I chose every book on the shelves personally, but I also hired an interior designer. "Ha, it's nice," she said with a feeble giggle. My mom put her leather purse on her lap and settled onto the gray velvet chair. Her eyes were a mixture of caution and fascination as she gazed at me. "Ruby, we must speak." Calm as a rock, I sat across from them with my hands on the oak table. "This must be related to the lottery, right?" My dad cleared his throat. "News travels quickly, your name was on the front page of the Providence Times article. You read the local paper now, then?" I partly smiled as I cocked my head. Nobody in this household even recognized my small feature back then. Lucy interrupted in a sickly sweet voice. "Ruby, we're not here to revisit the past. To be honest, I'm glad for you. Actually. Are you?" Leaning forward, I took 3 thick white envelopes out of the drawer beneath the table and carefully laid them out on the top one at a time. "Excellent. For each of you, I have prepared a really honest gift." They stared at the envelopes as if they were about to burst. "Lucy." I moved one envelope in her direction. "A check for $15,000, which you borrowed from me in 2016 to launch your online cosmetics store, is enclosed. You promised to reimburse me, but then, for convenience, I forgot." Lucy reddened. "That was, Ruby, a long time ago." "That's right. Additionally, I'm not going to wait any longer." I thrust the second envelope in front of me. "For Mom and Dad, this one. $22,500. It includes all of the money you have ever spent on me since I was a child. I have a notebook with all the details. Birthdays. Tuition for elementary school. The first bicycle. I even took bank interest and inflation into account." When my mother opened the envelope and saw the check bearing a financial firm's name printed on it, her hands shook. She remained silent. Simply sat in startled silence. I saved the final envelope for myself. I glanced up at them. This one includes Silver Incorporated's corporation documents and business strategy. Press, as well as any community project I've been managing. Nothing in here needed permission from the family. I worked alone. No favors, no borrowing. Ruby. At last, my father's voice became softer. You're misinterpreting. We are related. This isn't how we keep score. Not keeping score. I laughed. But it was devoid of joy. So you weren't keeping score when you spent hundreds of thousands on Lucy's wedding without even asking whether I could afford lunch? Did you not keep score when you purchased Lucy a brand new automobile but refused to co-sign my student loan? My mother murmured that we were worried about you. Because you consistently took such a different route. No, I wasn't Lucy, which is why you were worried, and now that I'm wealthy, I suddenly matter. Don't pretend it's something else. There was silence in the room. I got up and pushed open the door. None of the three of you are necessary to me. However, I now know exactly who needs whom. Lucy's voice was shrill as she gripped her handbag. You believe that because you were fortunate, you are superior to us. I didn't answer. I simply gave her a direct look. Lucy looked down at last. With tears in her eyes, my mother rose slowly to her feet. Ruby. You might not pardon us. However, don't drive us away in this manner. I realize my mistake. I gave a small shake of my head. It was okay for you to play favorites. You were mistaken for not recognizing me. And now that I no longer live to please others, you see me out of the blue. When they departed, I didn't immediately shut the door. The three of them vanished behind the line of purple lavender plants as I stood there. I felt calm for the first time in my life. Not bitter, not furious. Simply, free. I used to believe that they would leave my life when I stood my ground. However, when family members need money, they don't know how to leave. The texts began to arrive 3 months after that last encounter. Initially, they were courteous. Typical. In the middle of the night, like a soft knock. I hope things is well with you, Ruby. Your father has been feeling a little ill, so please give him a call as soon as you can. Hello, sis. I saw the Silver Incorporated article and am really pleased of you. I hope to hear from you soon. I didn't respond. I simply read them, I didn't remove them either. And said nothing. Then the tone shifted. The phony tenderness vanished. Supplanted by unadulterated despair. I'm pleading with you, Ruby, we're going to lose the house because your father's business is being sued for false bankruptcy. James made a poor investment, and the bank blocked our accounts, now I have nowhere to go, sis. Would you please assist me? I used to long to hear the word, sorry. However, they were no longer able to use the term sorry, even when they asked. They requested funds. Forgiveness. For forgiveness, but never for a place in my life again. For ignoring me under Lucy's feet like trash. I continued to work. The press for Silver Incorporated was growing. We were getting ready to publish a collection of short stories written by 3 young authors we had recently signed from the South Boston projects. With scores of submissions arriving every week, the editorial department was operating at full capacity. I was a bookworm. The want to be heard by those the world had overlooked, insincere voices. They wouldn't go away, though. Lucy was waiting at my gate one Friday afternoon as I was leaving the office and heading home. Her hair was a knotted mess, and her silk dress was crumpled. She didn't resemble the Lucy I knew before. Lucy, who was always immaculate and polished, used to make fun of me for dressing like an old maid. I locked the door, got out of the car, and took my time getting there. Her eyes were puffy and red as she took a step closer. There's nowhere else for me to go. I stood motionless with my arms folded. Lucy, do you recall what you said to me last? You claimed that because I had won the lotto, I felt superior to everyone else. Remember that? I was furious. I was wounded. No, you were embarrassed because I was able to succeed without assistance. You were scared to confront reality. That despite your parents' best efforts, you were unable to create anything that would last. Lucy started crying. James, you're right. He made a cryptocurrency investment. Gone, more than $500,000. The car was towed, and the house was confiscated. The friend I'm staying with is also relocating soon. I'm not requesting cash. All I'm requesting is a chance. I turned to face my sister. The person who accepted all of our parents' accolades, demands, and affirmations without ever feeling bad about it. Now, shattered and stripped down, all that's left are bare hands and a crushed sense of pride. I unlocked the gate. Enter. But only for 10 minutes. I normally read in the mornings on the porch, where we were sitting. Lucy's hands were shaking as she handled the steaming tea I had prepared. Have you given your mother a call? I inquired. Yes, I did. She also has nothing left. Their credit cards have been frozen, and Dad's business is being investigated. To try to minimize personal accountability, they have engaged a private attorney, but the results are not encouraging. Suddenly, everyone remembers me. They hope you'll forgive them, Lucy whispered after remaining silent. Like, you used to do it every time. Gazing off into the horizon, I let out a sigh. I needed them back then. I don't now. You're still a decent person. Oh. Lucy gave me a lost child look, her eyes wide. You won't let your family to disintegrate, will you? I put down my teacup. You are correct, I am a decent person. However, being nice does not entail making oneself into a cash cow for others. They never respected me for being good. They denigrated me for it. She gasped. Thus. Are you not going to assist? I got to my feet. I'll assist, but not in the manner they anticipate. I placed 3 file folders on the table after taking them out of my bag. O works at the local arts center as an assistant manager. When you were in college, you volunteered there. 2 is a position at a nonprofit that Silver Incorporated sponsors as an event coordinator. 3, I teach a free writing lesson. Students can benefit from your narrative assistance. Lucy regarded the files as though I had given her a stack of bricks. Do you really want me to work? As I did, from the very beginning. How about cash? Work is all there is, no money. And a decision? Anger flashed in her eyes as she leaped to her feet. You're receiving retribution. No. I'm giving you what I never received from my parents. An actual beginning. Other than that, Lucy said nothing. Like someone wandering through the remains of a dream, she picked up the folders and slipped out the gate. I held on to my now cold teacup there. I was aware. The storm had not passed. Due to the fact that my parents, they would not permit such a tranquil conclusion. The warm lights shone over the glass panes of the 3-story building where Silver Incorporated was located, and the sky over Providence turned amber that evening. The press had begun operations. The derelict warehouse had been converted into a lively area by us. There are floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, author illustrations on each wall, and a little platform for live readings in the corner. Wearing a plain black dress, I stood in the middle of the big hall with a glass of white wine in my hand. Authors, readers, journalists, and kids from our community programs were all seen grinning, conversing, and living in a society where words were valued more highly than wealth or prestige. That night was mine. And they arrived, like a curse that never knows when to strike. I spotted them as soon as they entered through the rotating glass door, my father behind her, his suit crumpled, the heels of his shoes scuffed, and my mother in a pale blue evening gown, her face meticulously made up but yet weary with fatigue. Lucy is still stunning, but her eyes are no longer filled with pride. They made their way toward me through the crowd without saying hello to anyone or checking their surroundings. It didn't surprise me. First to speak, my mother's smile faltered as she said, "Ruby. You succeeded." I took a sip of wine and looked directly into her eyes as I answered, without anyone's help. My father's voice was low as he looked around. We must speak. Immediately. I nodded and gestured to the tiny conference room with the frosted glass doors and soundproof walls at the end of the corridor. There. We were seated opposite one another. I refused to give them water. On a battlefield, politeness was unnecessary. Lucy was the first to speak, her voice raspy. We are on the verge of losing everything. James went out. The home's foreclosure notice was sent by the bank. My mom jumped right in. The business of your father. Officially, it's bankrupt. No shares, no savings. Not covered by insurance. Not a thing. I folded my arms and looked at my dad. Did you think about me now? He didn't raise his head to nod. Ruby, we're family. As if I were flipping over cards of fate, I got up and opened a file case I had prepared ahead of time, taking out 3 files and setting them on the table. There are alternatives, but no money. They gave me a fixed look. I moved the first folder in my mother's direction. Mom, an activities manager is needed at the Southside Community Care Home. They are seeking a communicative someone who can organize activities for senior citizens. Your profile is appropriate. They consented to an interview the next week. My mom's eyes got big. You mean return to your job? Start afresh, I mean. I handed my father the second folder as I turned to face him. A part-time financial advisor is needed for a community education-focused nonprofit startup. It's not a huge salary. However, they require an experienced individual. He held on to the folder. I used to oversee millions of dollars, don't you? I said icily, and lost it all too. This is an opportunity to start over. Just effort and learning how to create anything from scratch, no title, no power. I shoved the final folder in Lucy's direction. The Community Arts Center has an opening for an event planner. They are aware that you were a wedding planner. This is the initial phase. Actual labor. Not very lucrative, but steady. Lucy's eyes were watering as she gazed at me. Are you sure I can pull it off? You can, but nobody is paving the way for you this time. You walk it yourself. My mom broke down in tears. Ruby. I apologize. I realize my mistake. You are the only one who hasn't abandoned this family, but we ought to have stood by you instead of making you become like Lucy. I put a hand on the back of my chair and got to my feet. I haven't abandoned you. However, I'm also not pulling out my money. You'll have to be independent from now on. The same as I did. My dad cleared his throat. What if we say no? Although I'm not a bailout fund, I do wish you well. Nobody spoke again. The silence was only broken by the distant sound of jazz music coming from the lobby and the soft hum of the air conditioner. At last, Lucy nodded slightly. I'll make an effort. I turned to face my sister. I saw honesty in her eyes for the first time in years. As if he had just placed a big weight down, my father breathed after picking up the folder. And when she left the room, my mother clutched my hand tightly without looking up. I went back to the main hall after they left. With worried eyes, Jess approached me from the side. Are you all right? Better than ever, I nodded. The show went on. 12-year-old Eliza, our youngest author, was signing her first comic book. Her eyes gleamed as she hurried over after spotting me. They're waiting in line to sign my autograph, Miss Ruby. I stooped to smooth her hair. You're worthy. No inheritance, no titles. All of this was founded on rejection and distrust. And I was aware tonight when the people who had previously abandoned me made their first appearances in the actual world. I was victorious. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket that morning as I was watering the lavender pots on the porch that I had brought back from the South Providence Community Garden. I hesitated for a while when a name appeared on the screen. Lucy. The message was brief, just one line, but it was far more powerful than any of the flimsy justifications I had ever heard from her. "Hello, do you have any recommendations for my upcoming first interview with the Arts Center?" With my phone still in hand, I took a seat on the long porch bench. I went over the message once more. There was no emoji, no exclamation point, and no attempt to soften the statements with phony comedy. Simply, a sincere inquiry. I took a few moments to close my eyes. I had a vision of Lucy standing in the center of that magnificent event, wearing her $10,000 wedding gown. With violins, candles, and crystals. I feigned a smile as I stood on the sidelines back then. The comparison is always a faded shadow. The same Lucy who had formerly made fun of my fantasies was now seeking guidance on a legitimate career. Not tips on perfume brands, how to look good at soulless charity galas, or which wedding gowns make the best photos. I responded to the text. Be yourself, but not the version that other people think you should be. Lucy responded with a heart emoji a minute later. That was it. There was no superfluous wording or overanalyzing, and for the first time, I could see someone growing in that message. Setting my phone down, I got up and went back to watering the plants. The delicacy of the lavender blended with the aroma of moist earth. Behind me, a light wind stirred the curtain. My first novel manuscript was on my writing desk inside the house, awaiting a final edit before it was printed. The novel I wrote in that wet upstairs room above the old bookstore on lonely nights. Pain, crushed dreams, and a tiny hope that I would one day no longer be Lucy's shadow drove me to write it. I was standing exactly where I should have been, and no one was behind me now. On the front. I made my way to Silver Incorporated that afternoon. Press for the signing ceremony of 4 of our community writing program's young writers. They were all immigrants, 3 of them. A veteran who had previously experienced homelessness made up the 4th. They all clutched their manuscripts as if they were tangible versions of their dreams. I came to the realization that this is what really counts when they signed their very first publication contracts. Not the bank account, not the positive news, but actual change. From those who before thought they were voiceless. I sat in the backyard in my favorite spot to read that evening. The newly mowed grass was illuminated by the moon's soft light as it ascended gradually. We had a free downtown writing workshop, and a 14-year-old boy's handwritten letter was next to me. I doubt I would have ever ventured to write about my mother if it weren't for your class, Miss Ruby. You gave me hope that children like me have something important to say. I gently folded the letter while holding it and put it in the box of mementos of the most valuable times in life. There was nothing opulent in that box. Only his letters, a few children's scrawled drawings, my first draft of a manuscript, and a faded lottery ticket with my signatures still on the back. I grinned. Not due to my lottery win. But because I refused to allow my financial status define who I am. I rewrote my life using it as a pen. And to assist others in starting their own narratives. When my phone called again, it was my mother. I took my time responding. I opened the message after letting it ring. I just wanted to say, Ruby. You looked amazing today. And I apologize for not seeing this side of you sooner. I took my time reading. One word, then another. I apologize. It wasn't about wanting money for the first time. Perhaps as a result of failure, fear, or a deflated sense of pride. The apologies were sincere. I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't offered her my forgiveness. However, I was too busy living. In full. Freely. I knew as I shut my notepad and gazed at the moon. Money was never the reason for my achievement. This was my triumph. I had nothing left to prove to anyone. And I, Ruby Hadley, was now the lady I had always envisioned myself to be. From those ancient papers, filled with tears and scribbled words. It's not about winning the lotto in my story. It's about rediscovering who I am in the face of my own family's rejection and criticism. I rebuilt my life with my own hands and an unwavering heart from someone who was once disregarded. Numbers don't represent true wealth. It's in empowering others, living genuinely, and getting over the desire for approval from people who used to reject me. The greatest victory is that. Real worth, freedom, and peace. Your thoughts on Ruby's path and the decisions she made with her family? Leave a comment below with your opinions. For more moving, poignant tales about life and family, remember to subscribe to the channel.